It was year number 3 for the Bald Man, Joe Douglas and company. How did they do this year? Brennan Albert is here. I am Adrian Fedke. Now, I am somebody who normally hates draft grades. Do we really have to grade? Because I hate doing grades. Like, they're really stupid, and we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Adrian. Like, a lot of these draft grades, like, they're easier to give a couple years down the line. And the other thing, too, about draft grades is, first and foremost, they're obviously going to be subjective to the grader, right? But they're also subjective to the team. You know, like a case in point here, I didn't really love what the Atlanta Falcons did. I thought the Falcons reached on some of their players. However, they're more of a zone blocking team. So drafting Chris Lindstrom, as for example, as the first guard, okay, it fits them. So it makes sense, but I didn't love him as a guard. So I hear what you're saying, Adrian. You know, when we're talking about grading picks, it's pretty damn difficult to do.
Yeah, people really don't know. It's everybody has their perceptions and their preferences, and you know, it is what it is. You know, I saw a guy give the Giants an A, so it's like everybody has their own opinions. Anyway, we're here to talk about the Eagles, and we're not so much going to spend time on the picks themselves individually because that's what the film rooms are for. So we're just kind of going to get into whether or not we like what the Eagles did. So first round. I kind of talked about it heading into the draft. Don't be surprised if there's a player that they like and they try to trade up a couple spots to go get him, whether that's a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman. A lot of defensive linemen went off the board, and Jeffrey Simmons, the guy that we were talking about, went number 19 to Tennessee. So all of a sudden the board opened itself up with offensive linemen because guys were falling. Jonah Williams was the first tackle taken. And then Cody Ford didn't go, and then Jawaan Taylor didn't go, and Andre Dillard didn't go. So the Eagles made the move to go past Houston. They give up 2 draft picks to move up 3 spots, and they go get Andre Dillard for Philly.
I loved it. I mean, I love this because, again, Houston was going to take a tackle. I mean, that was like the worst kept secret in the NFL, especially when you're the Houston Texans.
And then they took a guy who was like, okay, like,
yeah, I mean,
like that's where you take him.
It became one of those things, Adrian, where when you lead the league 2 years in a row in quarterbacks hits and sacks, it's not a secret. Like, you have to draft an offensive lineman. So, like, I was totally okay with the Texans doing that, but it was one of those things where everyone knew that. Like, the Eagles knew that. So they said, if we want to tackle, we have to get in front of Houston because Houston is going to take an offensive lineman.
Yeah. And my thing, I didn't hate the pick like everyone thought. I wanted Jawaan Taylor. That was the guy I wanted. Now, I heard after the fact about the medicals and the fact that he's got bad knees. So, you know, that's the thing about these things. While you're live and you're watching the draft, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. This is what happened a couple years ago with Reuben Foster as well.
Yep.
So we had that you know, the situation going on behind the scenes, all that. We all wanted Reuben Foster. We kind of booed when they drafted Derek Barnett, but then we found out after the fact. Well, same thing here with Jawaan Taylor. So just kind of tell us what you heard about him.
You're 100% right, Adrian. And, you know, there's a lot of guys. How about Darius Geis from even not long ago? He was another one. Eagles fans were like, oh, yes, Darius Geis is here. Let's take him. Yeah. Why is he slipping? Well, turns out he got in a fight with Deuce. So, like, you can't have that and be like, oh, this guy's going to be a good pick if he's getting into physical altercations, with players or with coaches there. So when we talk about, you know, Jawaan Taylor, there were a lot of teams that apparently had said his knee issues got him to the point where they considered him a one-contract player, meaning they didn't think his career would be longer than 4 years. If that's the case, you don't draft him in the first round. You draft that guy second or third round. Rob Gronkowski was another guy people said that, and he obviously laughed them all the way to the bank. But the point still remains. You don't roll the dice on those type of situations in the first round. So all of a sudden when Jawaan Taylor slides, what happens? Dillard comes up because now he becomes the next best available tackle.
And as a fan watching it, you're like, oh, my God, Taylor, who you're thinking he's going top 10, and you're seeing him slide, and you're like, oh, my God, he's going to be there. They're jumping ahead. They're getting Jawaan Taylor. And then you hear Andre Dillard, and it's like, temporarily it's an until you kind of figure out what's happening. So, but, you know, hey, it is what it is. All right, so now we get into the second round. They take Miles Sanders. They take J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Do you like how they attacked the second round?
Well, let's first talk a little bit about Sanders here, right? I mean, I think that's obviously the more logical one. So obviously, you take him at 53 here. So the first question then becomes, okay, well, what else is on the board? Because before you can say, oh, I like this pick or I don't like this pick, it always becomes, well, what were the alternatives?
Yeah.
When I'm looking here, Adrian, the next guys that were in this mix, I mean, maybe if you like Paris Campbell, maybe if you like Nasir Adderley, maybe if you like Taylor Rapp, those were kind of the guys in that mix right there, probably to be there. But I'm cool with all of this. Like, I'm totally cool with Miles Sanders. I liked him a lot. I had no problem with the pick. The only thing that makes this pick look bad is when you see David Montgomery slide so far, right? That's what makes if you want to be a pessimist, that's how you could say, oh, this is a bad pick because we could have got, Montgomery later. Yeah, sure. Future, hindsight's 2020. I had no problem with this pick, Adrian. I really like this. I wasn't a huge fan of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now, we're going to talk more about him in the film room, so I don't want to give up too many,
Yeah. We won't get into him too much, but here's what I'll ask you. If it wasn't J.J., which would have been the receiver you would have taken?
Honestly, for me, DK Metcalf. And I say that because of where we would have got him. You get him at the end of second round, the guy who is all-world traits, all-world explosiveness, huge upside. Yeah, I'm cool with rolling the dice as the third player that I would draft from my franchise, being maybe the highest upside of any receiver in the draft. Yeah, I would have been okay with that. Again, because I would have gotten him so late in the second. That's why I would have taken him over JJ. I think JJ probably has a safer floor. So if you're someone who's looking as more of a guarded position and you want more of a safety, okay, I understand why you take JJ. But if you're someone like me where I'm thinking, hey, I got a plug-and-play guy in Dillard, I got Miles Sanders, now my third pick, maybe I want to roll the dice here, that's why I would have rolled the dice here, Adrian, taking DK.
Well, if you guys watched my live reaction video, I talked about my hatred for DK Metcalf. But at 57, it was enticing. And I would have pulled the trigger. Now, I'm okay with JJ because I like JJ more than other people. Now, here's the problem with JJ, and here's the question I'll ask you. Is he too similar to Alshon Jeffrey?
That's probably a fair concern, right? I mean, I don't think you're necessarily saying, hey, this is going to be a complementary to Alshon. I think this is going to be a twin of Alshon. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, Alshon's had a hell of a career. Let's not get twisted and make it sound like Alshon's some bad receiver. Yeah. But as far as, complementary, yeah, I don't know if they really complement each other super well, Adrian. However, I'm not saying it's a bad pick. I'm just saying I would have rather rolled the dice on DK because I think the upside's much higher.
Yeah. Yeah, in the second round when the picks came around, I was thinking Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was going to be one of the picks just because of how it seemed enamored the Eagles were with him. And then he slid to the fourth round. And then the Eagles never picked him. So that was like the only other guy that was floating around that I was thinking about at the time. Miles Sanders to me was a no-brainer pick at 53. And at 57, my eyelids rose up just a little bit, but I do like JJ more than other people, so I was okay with it. But my only thing, again, it's the Alshon thing. But in defense of the pick, the game is going towards the red zone. So you got to have a shutdown red zone defense and then a proficient offense in the red zone. And when the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017, they had the number one ranked red zone offense in the NFL. So you have JJ, Alshon, Dallas Goedert, Ertz, all in the red zone. That's a lot of targets for Carson Wentz.
No disagreements here, Adrian, with you. Like, I understand everything you said there. I just think it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Dallas Goedert pick, and that is it a good pick? Yeah. Is he worth that pick? Yeah, probably. But I think this was more of a luxury pick opposed to a replacement. I probably would have either, if I'm going receiver, I would have gone DK because of the upside there. Because if I strike out on the third player picked in my draft, I'm still going to probably do okay in my draft when we look back at it 3 years later. Yeah. I probably would have rather, though, one of the safeties on the board, or the guy I was really a big fan of was Zach Allen from Boston College, if you want that versatility up and down your defensive line.
Well, that's good that you bring up that name because it's an easy transition now for Shareef Miller. I wasn't crazy about the pick. They wait until fourth round to go D-line. In a historical D-line class, they kind of reach a little bit for Shareef Miller. I wasn't crazy about that one. So they didn't really get one of the great D-linemen in this draft.
Yeah, this was one of those guys. I won't go as far to say as a head scratcher because I think we all knew the position makes sense. I don't have a ton of problem with the player because when you look at the other guys that were options after him, it gets pretty few and far between. And that's kind of what me and Adrian talked about with the D line is there's a little bit of a drop off after that first group, especially when you look at it. This year's draft set the record for the most defensive tackles in the first round. So when you see that happen, you're going to see a big domino and snowball effect. I wasn't a huge fan of this pick, Adrian, either. But at the same time, I mean, the next defensive end taken was Joe Jackson from the University of Miami. Once the Cowboys,
I would have taken Joe Jackson over Shareef Miller.
And if you wanted to, like, okay, I don't think there's a huge disagreement there. So the way I look at it is you took Miller at 138. The next defensive end went at 165. So what's that tell me? You probably could have traded down and still gotten a defensive end. And if that would have happened, Adrian, then I'm totally on board with it. This one, not a huge fan of this. But again, I get the position need and the value there.
Yeah. I brought it up in a PI Live show about a month ago. I told the guys on the panel, don't be surprised if the Eagles use a 5th or a 6th round pick on a quarterback. They said I was crazy. They pick up Clayton Thorson. I know my Eagles very well, and I know how much they value quarterbacks.
Well, I mean, how can you not, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. Carson Wentz is not Eli Manning as far as injury durability, right? He's great quarterback, and you know what?
We can keep it real, guys. It's okay to say it.
We just gotta call it like it is. And here's the thing: when I look at Carson, if you tell me the biggest concern about my quarterback is he might miss 4 games a year, I'm cool with it because that tells me he's doing everything else fantastic. But at the same time, you can't be naive. You still also have to make sure you have a protection plan. So Clayton Thorson here from Northwestern, he was a guy, Adrian, that if he didn't have that late injury, I'm kind of curious if he would have gotten drafted a little bit higher than the 5th round. There was a lot of buzz about him, and then he just, got injured at the wrong time, didn't have the opportunity to do things like the Senior Bowl, which really, really helped quarterbacks. So in the 5th round, hey, maybe best case scenario, maybe hopefully it doesn't happen, but if Carson misses some games and he comes in, maybe in a year or two, the Eagles, trade him for a 3rd round pick, and hey, that's a net of 2 rounds. That's worth it to take him then.
Okay, that's good call that way. I look at it like this because I remember back in the early 2000s, Donovan McNabb, he'd get hurt all the time. And I remember there was a season where McNabb got hurt. He broke his leg. I think he broke his broke his leg against Arizona. I think that's what it was. And then the next week, Coy Detmer comes in, and he kills it against San Francisco, but he got hurt. So then you had to go to A.J. Feely. So you think about a situation like this where the 3rd stringer, you want a game manager. You want a guy who's not going to turn the ball over. You want a guy who's going to be smart. And you want a guy who's just cool with handing the ball off the time. And that's what you're going to get with Clayton Thorson.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, look, here's the truth. As I heard a great quote here from Bill Polian, okay? Someone asked Bill Polian once, hey, Coach Polian, why don't we get the second-team quarterback reps under Peyton? And he looked at the reporter and he said, because if 18 goes down, we're fucked. And we don't practice fucked. And that's the truth. Like, when you look at the 3rd-string quarterback, in many ways, that's kind of what you're saying, right? You're pretty much just saying, hey, go in there and hopefully we can win a game 17-14 because we'll play really good on defense and special teams and don't ask our quarterback to hurt ourselves. When you take a quarterback in day 3, that's typically what your expectations are. This is just going to be a guy who's going to battle for a roster spot. And if we get to that worst-case scenario and he actually has to play some meaningful games, don't turn the ball over.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a couple more questions for you before we head out. Do you think that they should have traded back at all with one of those 4th or 5ths because they only took 5 players again? Like, they didn't take a bunch of players last year. They didn't take a bunch of players this year. Now, I know they signed a bunch of undrafted guys, but would you have tried to trade back at all to gain more picks?
I probably would have, Adrian. And, this is the other thing you got to remember, folks. It's easy to say trade back. But if you don't have a dance partner that's willing to trade with you, you can't trade back.
Yeah.
Now, the situation I would have traded back, Adrian, would have been either where JJ was taking or Shareef Miller was, because I didn't particularly love either of these guys. And if you told me we'll take them, but we'll trade back to take them, then I'm all in. And I think it's a great situation. I think like Hollywood Brown's a perfect situation for the Ravens. Do I think Hollywood Brown's a first-round receiver? Not necessarily because of injury concerns, but because the Ravens traded back and got him, it makes total sense. Yeah. I think that if I would have been a fan of the Eagles doing that with either the JJ pick or with the Miller pick, but again, Adrian, it's easy for me to say trade back because I don't know if anyone else was going to trade with them.
Yeah, in hindsight, it's always easier. And the second round, that JJ pick, that would have been the pick to trade back with because Miles Sanders was a no-brainer at 53. And then at 57, the way the board was kind of playing itself out, there was still a lot of good players. So if you would have kind of traded back and say middle of the third round, you still could have gotten DK. You still could have gotten they drafted Sanders, so they wouldn't have drafted him. But Nasir Adderley, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, whatever, you could have drafted a bunch. But they stayed put, and they only took 5 guys. All right, linebacker. So they addressed it via the undrafted route. They go TJ Edwards. A lot of Eagles fans didn't like the fact that they didn't take a linebacker, but it wasn't a good linebacker class. There was Devin White, Devin Bush, and then that was pretty much it besides Mack Wilson.
Yeah, and obviously Mack Wilson went 155 overall. And when you got all the reports.
I heard a rumor of why he fell, but I don't think I should share it.
Yeah, you and me know that same rumor. And again, there's no reason to bash it if we don't know if it's true. But
yeah, we're not going to say it.
The reports that I heard, I'll say this. With Daniel Jeremiah, he came out and said, there's some stuff. That was the quote he said. There is some stuff in his off the field that became a larger concern than the general people know. Mm-hmm. So when you go to the 5th round and you have 32 teams passing on you multiple times, it's because that stuff is pretty noticeable. And it's because all 32 teams agree that this is some stuff we don't want to look into. Yeah, Adrian, I hear you with the linebacker stuff. To me, why fit a square peg in a round hole, right? If you don't think that there's a really potential starting linebacker that falls to you in a situation, then don't draft one. Go fill out the rest of the 10 spots on your defense and the 11 spots on your offense. And then when you find a linebacker later, whether that's a trade, whether that's free agency, so be it. Yeah. I also will say, folks, if you set yourself up with the belief of, well, we got an undrafted free agent and he's going to come in and play linebacker for us, I got some great beach site that you should buy from me in the state of Idaho because you are setting yourselves up for extreme failure believing that type of stuff. Besides like your Vontaze Burficts, those guys who didn't get drafted because, again, of some stuff, those guys don't happen very often. So I'm okay with the fact that they didn't take a linebacker, Adrian, but I do believe this is something that is a concern in the next couple off seasons.
Yeah, you got to remember it's Kool-Aid drinking season, and all the beat writers, they've got all the golden nuggets and all that positive information that the Eagles fans are just eating up like a bowl of Fruit Loops, eating up every single one of them. Put some marshmallows in those Fruit Loops as well because it's delicious. Okay. So, yeah, dude, I'm actually in agreement with you on the linebackers. I didn't disagree with you. I think that was the way to go. And, in some ways, the guy that they got, he might have been drafted in the 6th, 7th round if the Eagles had a pick anyway. So there's the way to look at that as well. Overall, I don't give draft grades, but I'll just say it's a B. I like what they did with the first 3 picks. Not so much the last 2. Might have traded back. So I'll give it a B, I guess.
Yeah, I think, Adrian, I probably would have gone B plus A minus. I'm a little higher on this draft than you are. And I'm also a believer, let me say this. I'm a believer that regardless of your team, whether you have Tom Brady, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, insert quarterback, I believe you should draft a quarterback every 2 years, every 3 years in general. Like, I just think you should do that just to have that backup. Or if you're the New England Patriots, be able to trade them for value down the line. So I was totally cool with that pick. The JJ pick, okay, it's fine. I thought about it the same way I thought about Dallas. It's a nice pick. I'd rather have you gone different ways. But you know what? It's not a bad pick either. I like Miles Sanders. Obviously, Adrian, as you and me talk about, I was all about going offensive line early. So I'm thrilled they did it. The only knocks I have is, you probably would have liked a linebacker or a safety. But besides that, Adrian, I thought it was a great draft.
Yeah, and the other thing A lot of the national people were saying that the Eagles needed a cornerback, then they didn't draft a cornerback. No, they didn't need to draft a cornerback, guys. It was okay.
If you are of the belief that, you know, there's not a clear number one corner here, the Philadelphia Eagles, I won't argue against you, right? But I'm also saying you need to give Sidney Jones one more full year to really get a crack at it before we completely say, hey, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
And you know what? You brought Ronald Darby back. I don't think he's elite, but he's more than capable of being a solid starting corner in the NFL. So I'm okay with it, Adrian, right now.
Yeah, the way I view Ronald Darby is basically he's oh God, what's the word? He gives you flexibility in case the guys don't pan out. I guess I don't know how to word that, but basically, if the draft picks like if Sidney Jones or whatever doesn't work out, then you extend Darby for a couple more years, and that's how you work that situation out. And if Sidney Jones does pan out this year, then you can kind of let Darby walk, and you're a little bit cheaper until you have to pay Sidney Jones. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, it does, Adrian. And, like, when I'm looking at, like, the recap of the draft, these are the kind of guys that were realistically on the board. Let's say everyone's in agreement, which no one is. Let's say everyone was in agreement that Andre Dillard was the right pick there. So then the options would have been at the second round, David Long from Michigan, Justice Lane from Michigan State. Let's take a peek.
Everybody wanted David Long.
Yeah, Lonnie Johnson, you know, went right after Miles Sanders. Are we really confident that any of those guys are 1,000% plug-and-play corners? I'm personally not. I understand the potential of all of those guys, but, man, I would have been okay if you told me the Eagles take any of those corners instead of JJ, but I definitely wouldn't have taken any of those corners over Miles Sanders.
Oh, definitely not. No, definitely not. And I still would have taken Miles Sanders even knowing the running backs that are going to be available next year. I like the fact that he was there at 53. Just take him and get him now.
Yeah, sometimes we don't need to overthink this. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you don't got to be looking 4 years in advance. If you have a really good football player on the board and you have him graded highly, take him, and you'll figure things out as we move forward.
There you go. Brendan has spoken. Where can we find your podcast?
You guys can find me at Burton TD. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify. We even have our own Twitter handle. So if you guys have enjoyed listening to me, please check out my podcast with my buddy here, Tony Del Grasso. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Tony D. There it is. Yeah, we're going to have to bring him back for a Philly show pretty soon. So there's that. All right. That's Brendan Albert. I am Adrian Fetu. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed our Eagles draft coverage and hopefully you enjoyed this show. So there it is. Take care.
Appreciate it, guys.